Yeah, so my name is Cory. I'm from the Leftovers Foundation. Maybe a little bit about myself. I'm fairly new to my role, so all things leftovers, I'm still learning. I started my role in February, but before that, I was the executive director of an organization called Campus Food Bank at the University of Alberta. So it's a food bank focused on post-secondary student food insecurity, operated as a food bank, but ran a number of programs around working to increase food security in the university environment and support students. So through that, I've been able to kind of connect, especially within Edmonton, but beginning to more broadly, the food security movement, I think, within Alberta, Edmonton and Calgary. I'm also a board member on Food Banks Alberta. So I have a relationship to kind of different food banks within the province and some interaction with that system. Yeah, so a little bit about leftovers. We are predominantly a food rescue organization. Started in, I believe, 2014 in Calgary, but have expanded to Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, and then we have some operations in Hinton and Airdrie as well. So we work to rescue food from what we call like small to medium operators, restaurants, bakeries, small businesses, that kind of thing. And we work to redirect it to agencies who have client-facing programs. So to food banks potentially, or to, oh, do you want? So yeah, I'll let them in. To food banks, meal programs, soup kitchens, kind of anybody who runs meal programming or food programming, we can redirect rescued food to them. So we do work with roughly over 100 different donor businesses across all our locations. Another big component of the organization, our mission is twofold. It's one to rescue the food, to redirect it to support food security, but it's also to redirect it from landfill, working to kind of protect environment and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, our main program, like I mentioned, is our rescue food program. Some of the things on the horizon for us is again, I'm quite new to the organization still, but we are looking to grow our rescue food program, and I think it'll be our focus for the next couple of years. We do have some plans to move into communities throughout Alberta at this point. Kind of the other major cities like Fort McMurray area, Grand Prairie, Lethbridge, and Medicine Hat, with one day probably going to Red Deer, as that would kind of be our last major city to move into, as well as ways of looking at how can we move into smaller communities. So like I said, we do exist in Hinton and Airdrie, but we'd like to kind of explore a model of how we exist in small municipalities, recognizing we're not going to be able to go in with the same level of resources. So what does like a volunteer only program look like? So kind of through, ideally, I think the food bank network in the province, we're going to look at exploring moving into some of those communities, recognizing that like a lot of our redirection would predominantly go to a community food bank, as well as other agencies and programs who could use them. And we do have some kind of very tentative plans to look at other provinces as well, predominantly Saskatchewan, and I think looking at what else we can do in Winnipeg and Manitoba, growing a little bit beyond there. Just for some statistics, so we have around 500 volunteers, over 150 food donors, over 150 agencies. Last year we rescued just over 1 million pounds of food, which is worth about $2.6 million. So pretty significant impact and value kind of given back to the community, especially of things that just would have gone to landfill. Just so far this year, so it's, I think, going to turn out to be a pretty good year based on our Q1 data, as we're kind of looking at hitting last year, but hopefully exceeding it a little bit, especially with growing. We'll likely launch in those other cities I mentioned sometime this year, so our impact will definitely be growing. Another program we operate that will be coming up soon is Home Harvest. This started last year. So this is focused, similar, again, rescue food, but focused on like home gardens. Came from organization within Edmonton, Operation Fruit Rescue, approached us and we had conversations about kind of taking over their programming, as I believe that it wasn't viable for them anymore. And there's a lot of apple trees in the city. So because of our model, because of our logistics and our volunteer power, like we've been able to do a lot of this rescue. So like last year was the first one. I think this is another thing we're looking at growing out. So it'd be from, I believe, kind of picks up in July until September, late September, early October. Fruit trees, home gardens, kind of anybody can contact us and we'll go into like a harvest essentially. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities with, like, again, it's a lot of apples, but looking at some upcycling stuff, if there's ways that we can take, there's only so many apples that any agency or food bank wants. But if we can figure out some ways to, like, create viable products from that, applesauce, apple pie, but these kinds of things, I think is a good way to increase, one, preserve them, ensure they're not going to landfill, but I think we'll be looking at it as a way of a potentially revenue generating activity for us, or like fundraising activity. It's predominantly in Edmonton. I think we're, again, kind of looking at like how can we grow this in Calgary and Winnipeg as well. A couple other pieces. So one of the big things we've been doing over this last year, I'll speak briefly. So new is our upcycling program. That's similar to what I mentioned with the apples, but we've had several instances where we have like a large donation where we're able to take it and work with a partner to turn it into a viable product. So one example was bread here in Edmonton with, I believe it was Stick Brewery. They were able to turn it into beer. So when there are large donations or something that we don't have, like no agency can receive them or use them, sometimes we look for ways of this, again, to prevent landfill, but it does work as a little bit of a revenue generating activity for us as well. Kin is a new project we had started. It's a pilot of a pay what you want market and coffee cart in Calgary and 2 YMCA locations. That started in January. I'll flip to, so this is what the coffee cart looks like. So the coffee cart operates, I believe, 4 or 5 days a week. If individuals can come and purchase coffee for any price, really. We have suggested pricing posted, but it's pay what you want. So it's up to the individual to choose what they pay. The idea behind this is it adds like dignity into the process for folks who can maybe not afford these things. They're still able to access it in a dignified way. And then again, here's the market. So the market operates twice a week. I believe it's Saturdays and Mondays, I think, at the Shaughnessy and Saddletown YMCAs in Calgary. Yeah, and individuals can come and do their grocery shopping and like pay the price that they're able to afford. So it's been pretty successful. I think we're still going through the data. We plan on keeping it going until probably mid-August will be when our pilot finishes. I don't know if it's as viable, like it's definitely a pilot for us, so we're testing it out. Like, is this something that is sustainable or can support itself? I think we kind of need to do further exploration on this, and there are other partners we're working with who are potentially interested in kind of carrying the model forward, I think, into the future. So I think going forward in the next couple of years, our focus will be more on the rescue food side and growing out that program throughout Alberta, as well as, I think, deepening our impact in the communities that we're in. Yeah, so that's a little bit of what we've been up to over the last year or so. Yeah, that's all I had for today.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, how are you guys funded? Do you get like grant funding, or is it just through your operations?
No, it's when I talk, yeah, it's grant funding and fund development, so fundraising, donations and such. Most of the revenue generating stuff we're experimenting with is relatively low dollars, so it's fundraising and donations and grants.
And I also wonder, do you reach out to connect with potential clients? Like I'm thinking about schools or food banks. Do you reach out to them, or do they know to get a hold of you?
We do agency outreach. We haven't been in a while because we have an agency waiting list. We basically have more agencies who would like to receive food than we have food to give. One of the ways with the model of how our program works is once we set up a route, so we have a donor business, they have excess food and we give it to an agency, that's stable. They would receive that every week so that their program can rely on it. So it does mean it's hard anytime we want to onboard new agencies or there's additional people, we have to find more or new businesses to donate. Yeah, so it gets a little bit tough, especially in the larger cities. I think in every city we have an agency waiting list at this point.
And the last thing I wanted to say is when you were talking about the home harvest, that the schools maybe could do dehydrate, because I had looked into how much would it cost for the schools to get dehydrated apple slices from like BC, and it's quite expensive, and plus there's a lot of packaging. So if the schools could just get the home harvest and then as part of their foods program, slice and dehydrate, and then that would be snacks. I don't know if that the schools are connected with that home harvest.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think that's an interesting opportunity though, for sure. Because like I said, I think we end up with more apples than we know what to do with. So some of the tough part too is that people grow like crab apples and stuff, and that's not there's sometimes I think really specific ways some of these fruits can be used. But yeah, I think we're definitely interested if you have ideas or have people to connect us to, like reach out to me, connect them to me, or I'm very open to having kind of further conversation on this. Yeah. Out there. So like if other towns or municipalities wanted to. Yeah, so there was a question from in person, was just basically how did Hinton come to be, because it's a little out of the way compared to the rest of our operations. So it came from a volunteer. It's just folks finding us on social media or seeing news about us. And I think we've always been really open that like, if you're interested in your community, reach out to us. So we kind of constantly have that message. So both Airdrie and Hinton actually came about that way of individuals in the community contacting us and saying, like, can we have your programming here? And then us working with them to set that up. So we don't have like staff presence or anything in Hinton, but our Edmonton coordinator works to kind of facilitate that community. So that's kind of going back to what I was saying of like, how do we expand more into these smaller municipalities? We've had some success in that, but I think we want to be a little bit more direct or put in a little bit more effort to maybe identify some key people who are interested in kind of championing our programming in those communities. And what is a way we can do that? I think there's a question in the chat. Oh. Yeah, Abney, did you have a question there?
Oh, yeah. I have just a few questions. So you say that you're volunteer run, and in our school, as we're piloting the program, what we're hearing from our administration, the teachers and principals, is that they don't want it to be volunteer run because of burnout, and it'll decrease the longevity and sustainability of the program. So I'm curious how you guys are doing it.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the really interesting things about leftovers is that I think it's a really it's a low touch volunteer engagement. So what it looks like from a volunteer's perspective, if they say feel like volunteering that week, so there can be kind of one-offs and regulars, but say, I want to volunteer for leftovers. You can go and see what routes are available. And then you do your route every Friday at 3 o'clock. And maybe it takes you an hour tops because you're just driving to, this bakery or this restaurant or whatever, picking up the donation and dropping it off at the agency. And then you're doing that regularly every week. So it's pretty low touch. So I think we haven't had a ton of have to deal with burnout a ton just because it's fairly easy to accomplish. And then as well, people can do like one-offs, like oh, what routes are available this week? I feel like volunteering this week, but maybe not next week, and go and accomplish some of those routes. I will say, like, there's a lot of stuff in the not-for-profit sector right now talking about volunteer burnout generally from COVID. Like, everybody is burnt out from COVID. It's been a long 2 years. So I think we probably do experience that to a degree as well. But I would say we get, because it's so low touch, kind of low effort, essentially, I think we can kind of navigate some of that. So I don't really have any, but yeah, I guess that's how we deal with it, if that answers the question.
Go ahead, Heather. I have other questions, but go ahead.
You go ahead and finish up, and then I'll jump in, okay?
Okay. And then one question was, you had really great measurements of pounds and value. Like, how do you measure the pounds? Do you have scales that you just weigh every box when it comes in, or and same value? Is it retail value? Yeah.
So pounds is the weight is the initial measurement. All volunteers get equipped with scales, so they do they weigh when they pick up from the donor agencies or when they drop off. It just at some point in the route, and then the rest it's honestly just a conversion from like pounds to dollars. There's valuations available. Same with the greenhouse gas emission. It's just a conversion, and I think we're looking at ways to make that more. I think the dollar valuation is probably pretty accurate, and there's more research to it. The GHG one I think is a little bit harder, just because I think it's really dependent on type of product, and we don't really have a measurement based on that. So it's just kind of a flat conversion at this point.
And the value is based on retail or wholesale, or kind of the cost, or? Yeah,
I believe so. I that's one of the things I haven't looked at our what our valuation is, but in my old role at my previous organization, we had a valuation as well that was published by Food Banks Canada. So there is like publicly available evaluations for donated food that are based on like estimates of recognizing kind of like, different foods is going to be worth different amounts, but you can take the kind of general averages of what gets donated, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And Scott, that's amazing. 15,000 pounds a week. Yeah, I also my mind is also used to weighing things in pallets, because that's what I used to do. So it's fascinating when you're talking about how much food is being moved around and where and things like that. And then just one last point about the apple tree harvest. So just as an example, in Canmore, it's been because apple trees are a bear attractant here, WildSmart has been doing harvest for the apple trees for quite a number of years. And so you can contact through Biosphere Institute in Canmore. You can contact them to see, I don't know where they're at with it. But yeah, that's just a potential into the Bow Valley.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good to know. Yeah, were there more questions?
Yes, Heather Morse. And excuse me, I'm calling in from the Annapolis Valley in Nova Scotia. And when you mentioned apples, of course, we are the capital here when it comes to apples. And I think this is such an exciting project. Now, when you approach, do you like approach the whole like apple growing association, or would you go to each individual orchard area and ask to go into to retrieve apples and that type of thing? Just
So we don't really do it with like orchards or anything commercial, like a commercial orchard or like a farmer. It's more like people's homes. So like one or two trees on people's properties.
Oh, okay. No, I was thinking that you were going into, because there's a lot of gleaning and so on with various vegetables, and we hear things at meetings. I do a lot of work to support schools, and people saying, oh, look at all the leftover vegetables and so on. And then others will say, well, you know, farmers might not let you in because of liability. You know, we're always trying to look at little hurdles to get over. So I just thought that sounded like a great idea. Maybe something we'll try.
Yeah, I think it's there is still, I think, additional gleaning probably to be done from commercial operations. That's not our focus right now, but I think it's definitely something to consider. And to Scott's question, no, actually, we don't do any compensation for mileage or anything. We do try to keep routes very small. So ideally it's close to both the donor business and agency, are close to where the volunteer lives. And like we have some routes that are like bike routes or walking routes even, just recognizing to try to make it easy on the volunteers.
Thank you.
It used to be a program of ours, and then it split out into a separate organization. So it's basically our sister organization. We've had still a kind of in-depth relationship with them. People are on both boards kind of thing. So we're separate organizations, but similar. Yeah, they were in Edmonton. They did have to pull out of Edmonton during COVID just due to difficulties. I know they intend to come back. I don't know the status of where that's at, but yeah, they're another great organization doing, I think, really interesting work.
We missed the name of that organization that you were talking about.
It's called Fresh Roots. So they're actually our operators. We pay them to run the market. Yeah. Yeah, because it's basically a pay what you want fresh roots market. That's in reality what it is. I mean, so the question is like, what has been the learnings from the pay what you want markets? I mean, I think it's a really valuable type form of programming. Like we've had a lot of, I think, really heartwarming stories from individuals who have shopped at the market and people talking about, because like we sell, you know, fresh fruit and vegetables, it's healthy food, people being able to access and afford that kind of food and cook meals that maybe they normally don't for their family, not because they don't know how, but because they can't access and or afford those kinds of foods. I think it's difficult to figure out how to make it go in the long run. One of the things we've talked about is potentially putting it. So right now, the two communities it's in, one is in kind of a lower income community, and the other one is in a middle of the road, kind of right on the average. We've been having conversations about trying it in like a higher income community. The idea being there, like, is there a way to kind of subsidize the whole thing? Yeah, especially if we can adequately communicate the pay what you want idea, and that it's about like paying it forward and like supporting your neighbors and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think we're talking about, can we roll out another one to kind of test that idea? One of the things we did have to do is put some limits on it. Just we had a small percentage of people accessing a very high percentage of the market, which I can't really comment on like whether or not, you know, maybe they needed it, maybe they didn't, but like we need to make sure that it's going to everybody as much as possible. So I think it was, a 15 item limit we imposed, and that seemed to correct that issue of, you know, a few people buying out a majority of the market for a small amount of money. So in terms of like, I guess like quote unquote abuse or anything, like we saw a little bit, but it's kind of easily, I would say, navigated with some small policy adjustments. Oh yeah. Oh, I thought yeah, they're not compensated. It's just volunteer. Any other questions? Cool. Okay, I will leave it there. Thank you.